I'm Neil Silvert from Your Gray Matters. This week's episode is part one of Rent to Own. Do you believe that you don't have a chance to buy a home? Well, this may show you how. At Your Gray Matters, we bring you solutions, miracles that already exist. Welcome to Your Gray Matters. Hi, everybody. I'm Neil Silvert from Your Gray Matters. Welcome to this week's podcast. As you know, at Your Gray Matters, what we do is we introduce miracles. We introduce solutions to things that already exist, but you may not know about them. And we're excited today to be talking about an answer, a very good answer to buying a home. People are very concerned today that they can't find a home, and if they find a home, they don't know how to get the down payment for it. They may be challenged with that. And too many people seem to have lost hope in this country. I am thrilled today to have one of the country's great specialists on a wonderful program called Rent to Own. This is a program that can be used by a person to find a way to actually own a home. It's not a new concept, but it is growing in popularity. Both Mark and I have been involved in this program for a while, and we believe in it. We're very privileged today to have Mark Vosylius on this podcast. Mark and I know each other from real estate, and we both believe that this is a viable miracle, as I call it, and we want you to know about it. Good morning, Mark. We're privileged to have you. Mark, why don't you tell us about yourself and why you love Rent to Own?
Thanks, Neil. That's quite an introduction. I was put off guard by the very first comment where you said it's a miracle. We're gonna discuss miracles, and I'm thinking, wow, this sounds a bit like a religious event, and I'm okay with that too. The idea of a miracle, I think, man, that's a great choice of words. But yeah, so to your point, you can tell by my gray hair that I've been around a bit, and I've owned several properties. And the rent to own concept, the rent to own strategy has been around for quite some time. It's just getting it done professionally and getting it done right. Like a lot of landlords can just do it on their own, but I, like a lot of people, have owned some rental property and been involved. So yes, to your point, the rent-to-own strategy, I have found after 25 years of full-time real estate investing, has been the most successful real estate investment I've made, because it's truly win-win. And I just quickly want to identify there's only two things you need. You need an investor and you need a tenant that are willing to work together. So basically, that's it. The hard part I found as a landlord, I owned 87 apartments at one time, and it was about 17 properties. I was going crazy. So I do understand, everything to do with managing and renting properties, dealing with N4s, N11s, oh my God, N1s, L1s, that the rent-to-own concept diminishes a lot of that concern. But more importantly, I'm going to say this, as I've gotten older, and I hate to say that, but it's true, that the win-win idea is really important. Making money's great, and that's what this is also about, but actually helping people get into a home truly is inspiring. So that's the miracle part. The miracle part is it really is win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and I've loved it since I discovered it many years ago. Like you, I've been involved in rent-to-own transactions, and it's amazing to see smiling tenant buyers, and it's really wonderful to see investor landlords, and they're all working together for the purpose of a tenant buyer being able to complete the purchase of that home over time. And people are concerned, Mark. People don't understand usually that when they want to buy a house, on the first $500,000 of that house, they're going to have to put down 5%. And then anything over that, they're going to have to put down another 10% as a down payment. So,
Correct.
ladies and gentlemen, on a $700,000 house, you're going to have to put down $35,000 on the first 500,000 and another 20,000 on the other 200,000. You're into $55,000 down. People are finding that challenging. Rent to own for me is a different answer. When I was a kid, and Mark, when you were a kid, we used to go to our store and have the layaway plan. You could buy a product, lay it away, make some payments. Eventually you paid for it. I like to think
you paid, yes.
Yeah, and I'm just showing my age. But I what I also really like though is that this is almost a layaway plan for a down payment. And it's
in theory, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but absolutely correct. So the investor, so I can see that we have the tenant over here and the investors over here. So the investor needs to understand that his money is assisting this person. He's making money in the 4 years, but he's actually helping this guy get that 10% down. That is a struggle. And as you know, on a $700,000 townhouse, which in Ontario is a pretty reasonable price to ask for, you're looking at $70,000. A lot of people have 20, 30, and they just, every month they realize, oh my God, it's going to take me another 10 years. And if you're 30, newly married, you're realizing I'm not even going to think of getting into them until I'm 40. So what we do is, in essence, it's a forced savings plan.
Yes.
And it's just like the RSP. If you look at what the government has done, is by creating an RSP, they force you to save money. However, they never really give you anything back. They're eventually going to get you with the taxes. As you know, RSPs is only a deferred tax.
Exactly.
But you can make money in there, and they say it's tax-free. Nothing is tax-free. This concept is that we force savings because we actually just literally charge a top-up on their rent. And if they agree to that and can and most importantly can afford it, we look at their GDS and TDS. If they can afford it, then we put aside roughly almost 20% of their rent into a savings, so that in 4 years that money goes back to them and they buy that property back. That in essence is really the win-win for them. We can discuss on the other, but that's the mechanics of it. You're absolutely right.
Yes, and so if we could bring it down a little bit, because sometimes people hear terms like GDS and TDS and they don't understand that it's debt ratios. So let's simplify for people who are new to this. Maybe you've had a scenario of one, but a person comes to you, Mark, or to me, and they say, I want to buy a house. I'm looking at a $700,000 townhouse. It's in Hamilton. And I have $40,000 already. I'm so proud of myself, but I've given up. I don't know how to get the rest. How would we help them, Mark?
Okay, so we're talking about a client right now. So a client tenant. And again, what I do is I find both. I find these tenant clients and I find the investors. And basically, I'm as you can see by my face, I'm in the middle. And I make a small fee. And let's face it, we're all in this because money is important, and we can all benefit by making a little bit of money. So with regards to your question, this person in Hamilton has, for example, 40,000. How we would work with this person is we would obviously do a full a financial analysis on him, very much like a bank would, very much like a mortgage broker. So there's no escaping the idea of being fiscally responsible. Yes. These investors we work with, they're probably sophisticated financially. So these people, they want to see these people become like them. To become like them, you really got to understand financing. So we do a little bit, and when I say a little bit, it's about a couple months worth of getting people to understand that, yes, we do need to understand your income. Yes, we need proof. We need your taxes. We need the NOAs. We need your tax returns. We need proof of employment. We need to see a history, exactly like a bank, because the last thing we want to do is to do all this work and then this guy doesn't pay. Why? Because we overcharged, or we didn't know some of the hidden debts that he had. So we really have to dig into their debts. Obviously, a full credit report and a full understanding. So again, to answer your question, that's the first thing we would do, Neil, is we would look at this person, we would help them, and there's no charge to this. We would go and we would use the word gross debt servicing and total debt servicing. Those are the GDS and TDSs that you were referring to. So those numbers are important. Why? Because they tell us how much money you have and your debt load. In other words, there's a ratio, and those ratios should be, in a healthy financial situation, well under 40%. In other words, 40% of your money goes to pay just to live, because underwriters, life insurance companies, understand that 60% of that money gets used on other things. So that's why we need to understand the financial concept. So that's the first step. To answer your question, Neil, is we would look and say, okay, what's your life financially? What do you like? Because again, these investors over here, they're going to want to see that. They're going to want to see, have we done our homework to see if this guy's financially? So that's the first step, if that answers it.
Yeah, it does. And it's important because like any transaction, you have to understand everything. But what you're also saying, Mark, is you provide an education for people. It's not your intent. They're not going to college with you.
Right.
And actually, they are learning principles. As you
Correct.
said, it's a savings plan. It's a forced savings plan with potentially the best outcome because that's their dream. They're looking to own a home. And right now, they don't see that in their life. But you still have to walk people through the proper steps. We have to have the right partners, the tenant buyer, the investor. You can't ask an investor to help someone to buy a home if you haven't even gone through due diligence. That's
Correct.
the words. So I really applaud, pardon me, rent to own, because that's a big part of it. We're not just going to throw someone into a process and then perhaps throw an investor in and not know what we're talking about. So you in the middle is actually a very, very important process. And it's good because people like you and I have an interest not only in making money, and we do, but you have to have somebody said to me, to be in rent to own, the investor, the tenant buyer, and the people like you and I have to have a bit of a heart. You have to have a love for welcoming people into their new home, no matter how long it takes, but that dream exists. I use the word miracle, you're right. It's also the word dream. And it's not fluffy. Business has always been built on somebody's dream and getting there.
Right.
So I love this. From there, once you've proved them, they look like they've met the requirements to be able to enter into a rent-to-own as a tenant buyer. What would happen next? I'm going to assume that, like any other transaction, there's legal documents, there's appropriate understanding of the documents. Sure that you visit your lawyer, but both sides, the investor and the tenant buyer, they of course know what they're getting into, and they've signed documents to back that up.
Right. And I do want to say that we're not going to be talking much about the investor side because I think we're saving that for another podcast, aren't we?
We are.
So today let's focus in on the tenant side. So the tenant that is interested in buying. So with that, so the first thing, exactly, we go through a basically financial thing. And as you were talking, I was realizing a lot of these people, what is it? Rumsfeld said, we don't know what we don't know.
Correct.
Or for other people that say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, wondering, why am I not getting ahead? So Einstein. People like us get involved and say, well, we've kind of done this before, and here's why. We have to be a bit like a doctor, and we got to do a blood test. And we go, I don't want a blood test. Well, we got to sort of test what's going on for us to make a proper analysis. So it's kind of painful. I don't know, like every time I'm getting mortgages myself and Mark, I need your financials. I need this. Oh, what's this? It's kind of painful. It's like getting something, prostate exam. I've done a few. They're not plain, but you got to do it.
You got it. By the way, that exam saved my life.
That's right. And so you know, it's the same thing about 5 years ago. That's another podcast.
Right. Okay? That's a different one.
It's painful, but it was good. So anyway, so these people, we do a financial analysis because, again, these people, if they say, well, why do I want a financial? I'm trying to tell you that there's reasons why you're not getting ahead. Let's look at that. So once that's done, to move to the next step is, if we look at that, we will then determine, say, we believe based on our financing or what we see that the information you gave us, you can afford X. So let's just assume you can afford a basic $500,000 condo or a townhouse somewhere. And we say, here's what you can afford. We then would say, once we approve, we would then say, great, you're approved for this. Is this something that you would want? And they go, yeah, I think we can find one. Then we say, go and find the home that you want. So the beautiful part about what we do is you find the home that you want. And we will then bring in that investor. So a lot of times, once they're approved, we sign them up to the program. They then go out and find a home that they like. And 99% of the time, it's not at the price that we recommended. It's always a little bit more. Mark, we found one for 45, 49. I go, yeah, but our GDS says it's got to be under 40. Now we're at 42%. And going, oh man. However, we work with it and say, guys, and of course, people are together and families are together for a reason. We want to help people. So let's just assume it ends up being 529.
Yep.
So we end up getting a purchase. While they're doing that, Neil, we find an investor. We have an investor lined up and saying, guess what? We have a guy. He's going to be looking in the Hamilton area. He's going to be doing this. And it's going to be this amount. It's probably going to be a 500. Let's just say 500. Therefore, you're going to need about $100,000 to $125,000 investment because that's what's going to be missing. Yep. And then with this guy has to have a minimum of 5%. Right. So we can't. This is a sort of, I don't want to say it's a hard threshold, but it's a pretty good threshold.
It is, though. Really, it is.
It is that if you can't save $25,000.
Yep.
And and if you've got like 3, I'm sorry, you got to show us that you can save something. Exactly. There's got to be some, because it's got to be win-win. We don't want to be all doing everything. So there has to be some responsibility. You've raised children, I've raised children, teaching children responsibility. Hate to say it, there's a little bit of this where we're teaching kids how to become financially responsible, even though they're adults. A lot of people are not financially responsible. And so therefore there's a little, so with that, yes, there is a threshold of 5%. We have gone down to 3, Neil, on these, because we do see sometimes very high income, perhaps a death in the family, took money, there are extenuating circumstances.
Exactly.
And we absolutely, work. Unlike a bank, we do look at character. Unlike a bank, we do look at personal things way more. We weigh those things much heavier than regular. So that is a threshold of 5%. So there is about on a 500,000 purchase, there would be a $25,000 requirement that we would need.
Yep.
And then they would go out and look at that home and purchase it. And of course, that's a whole other process of determining, a quality home. And that's another educational process.
It is. Mark, just to jump in though, and I salute you for this. I think that there's a misconception that people think that once they're approved, then you're going to pick out the house for them. But they're not. They're free to go and find the house that they want.
Yeah. Well, that's the beautiful part, because I simply say, I don't want to live in it. You're the one that wants to live in it. You're the one that wants to buy it. And then that is the key, Neil, where this investor really doesn't understand, or many regular landlords, is this person who's renting it from you wants to buy it. And more importantly, he picked it out. He didn't go to you and say, I'll rent your room. No, he's going, I'm gonna live in this place. I'm gonna rent it, which means what's he gonna do? He's gonna take care of it. He's not gonna want to bust a window. He's not gonna bring his friends over and put heads through drywall. No way.
And that's the kicker in this program. The investor's getting someone who's not going to destroy their own home, which is a risk when you're a landlord.
That's right. And so we find tenants that want to get ahead in life. That again, Neil, you've been involved in the whole motivation game. There's nothing better than a person that wants to improve their life. That's all. That's really the key requirement. It's like the first step in the 12-step program. You got to acknowledge something. And that acknowledgement can be very, very difficult to some people because we're dealing with pride. Well, I don't need this. Fine. Then stay in the insanity world. Stay in the insanity saying, well, I can't buy a home. And then, of course, we can hear it in the headlines, the bitterness of people who do have homes. Oh, they were just lucky. Oh, they were just, no, they were smart. They took the financial hardships to figure crap out. They started hanging out. And Neil, you know about motivation. We talk about Jim Rohn and things like that, where he says, what book are you reading now so that 5 years from now, you are going to be prepared? That's a little bit what we do. We say, we're going to educate you so that in 5 years from now, you can afford that home you've always wanted. And that's why, to me, it's a win-win situation.
And I love it. And now you're talking about winning principles that the wealthy people do, that the winners do. I was very privileged years ago. My bride and I were building a business, and they brought on this young speaker that nobody ever heard of, except that his name was Robert Kiyosaki. And he basically did Rich Dad, Poor Dad with us. And we actually got to be taught by him for 4 or 5 sessions over years. There was nothing more than expanding our mind and preparing ourselves to be in real estate. Never
and
to read.
yeah, and Neil, I can, for people that are looking, I can say it took me to 40 by the time I realized I started listening to the Zig Ziglar type guy.
Yep.
And he says, everybody says this. They say, what do you want to be? Well, I want to make $1 million. He goes, okay. Have you written it down? He goes, no, it's up here. He says, then you're not serious. Then you're not serious. And I thought about that because it's true. I was cocky. I was 25. I was, Mr. Know-it-all and all that. At 40, I started hitting some roadblocks. My kids were starting to get, pressures of money, business. I had a business that wasn't quite doing what it was supposed to do. And so I needed to be this person and say, what am I doing wrong? That insanity thing was drilled into my head. And that's when I started listening to other people. And the rent-to-own program is very much connected to the idea of improving your life. And we're talking about these people here. We're going to talk about these guys later, but these people here are the ones that we're looking at. And if you can do that and accept the fact that perhaps some of these people, the reason why we ask these questions is we kind of, want to help you. But again, like a prostate exam, it hurts a bit.
But the thing is, Mark, what you're talking about is mentorship. And what you
Yes.
do and what I do aren't necessarily full-time mentors. The truth is that people have to learn principles. Even when I found my first mentor, and I still talk to him, he met me, he looked at me, listened to me, and said, here's a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. Don't come back till you've read it twice.
Right.
And I'm not a strong reader, and it was harsh, but it was the best book that I ever read because it got me going.
Yeah. And I guess, we're drilling, hopefully, people watching this on, the tenant clients, they're understanding that that's your first step, is at least to accept the fact that, okay, whatever I've been doing, perhaps I haven't been doing it right. And that some of these people who have money, who have real estate, that how did they get that? And I'm trying to say, I was absolutely there. And now, 20 years later, I'm not saying I'm here, but I'm saying I do understand that if I didn't make those changes, if I didn't say to myself, okay, what is it that I'm doing wrong? So I started, like you, I joined an investment group. I joined different things to understand about investing. Now, 2005 is when I was 45. So, the world was different from a real estate perspective. You could throw a rock and you could get 12% cap rates on stuff. That world is no longer here.
Absolutely.
So that's discussion we're going to have later. But for these people here that are looking, we just want to drill into your heads that we're here to help you, and we need to analyze that. And to do that, we've got to do that first step. And then the second step is you got to find a home. Now, Neil, in finding that home, we have advice as well. We're not going to say, look, this home is not going to last. As you know, some people, they do not understand what an appraisal will do. So we have to do an appraisal. And, when you go and purchase a home, we need an appraisal to understand not only just an appraisal, but a home inspection. So now we've done the financial reporting. Go out and get the home. Now we got to do the house reporting. We got to do is this house, what's the roof like? What's the furnace like? All these different steps, creating a report to say, in 10 years, you're going to have to do this. In 5 years, you're going to have to do this. And so we advise these people to say, look, here's your financial responsibilities 10 years down the road. Because that's another thing people don't think of. When you're renting full time, you don't care about the roof. You don't care about the furnace. Why? Because let the landlord take care of it. We're trying to teach these people who want to be homeowners, these are the things you got to look for. You got to take care of them.
And it's a really good point, Mark, because whether you're in one of these agreements for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, you have to have the ability to demonstrate that you even understand what you just said, Mark. You're going to need new windows. You're going to want to do new paint. You may have to do a roof.
Right.
This becomes a much longer plan than just getting into the house. We're helping people to understand how to keep the house.
Right. We're like we're saying, it's a mindset. Robert Kiyosaki talks about the mindset of the rich dad, poor dad, that your bank account becomes your report card, things like that he would talk about. So in many ways, we're trying to get people to say, look, we're here to help, but some of these things, you have to change your thinking. And part of your thinking is you're no longer a renter. Yep. You're going to be managing and taking care of a house. Here are the things that you need to look at. So yes, so before we purchase, we have an appraisal. and we have to do a home inspection. And then we sit with that person. Of course, then there's the process of, well, what happens upon purchase? Well, truthfully, then the investor purchases the home for this because they can't qualify. Why can't they qualify? Many reasons. Probably down payment is one of them, probably self-employed, probably a new immigrant, probably a bankruptcy or some personal issue that happened in their life that prevents them from getting a mortgage. In reality, this is the person that's getting the mortgage. That's the assistance. That's like the parent, right? A lot of people say, well, you got to, the bank of my parents. They're the ones getting the mortgage. In many ways, this investor is going to do that for them. So, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was going to say, so I once had that conversation with a potential tenant buyer, said, I don't want to go through this. I said, you expect me to go to a person who's willing to extend themselves to help you buy a house and they don't even know you, and you're not willing to do what we need you to do? Sorry, we're not going to do it. But if you will do it, you may just have that house faster than you think that you could.
Right. And again, I'm hoping as people are watching, there's reasons for every step of the way that I've been discussing. There's reasons why we need to know financial. There's reasons why we need to understand the house a bit more, because we've been there. We know that these are the problems that are going to come up. So I guess the final part is we then bring in the investor. The investor buys the property, contracts. This is the big one. The contracts between this person and this person is very important. That is a future purchase sale agreement. In essence, this person is renting the home that they picked, that we have helped them say, this is what you can afford. You then have a contract where you rent it from this person, and it's a fixed term contract, which means if all you did was honor every agreement in that contract, you get to buy that house back from this investor in about 4 years for a fixed price. And that is one of the key elements of people saying, well, how does that get determined? I'll tell you how it gets determined. It's roughly inflation. So a home will roughly appreciate by roughly inflation, which is what? 5%, 4 or 5%. Yep. 99% of the 1,200 homes that we have financed, the appreciation is more than what the contract said. So who wins? This guy. We would say, and I've done enough of these, I don't know, $500,000 home, 5% appreciation. In 4 years, that contract is going to say about $630,000. After 4 years, we're going to get an appraisal. If it comes in and says this home is worth $800,000, that's too bad. The investor gets his fixed return, and who wins? This person. He just bought a home. Sure. He just bought a home that's worth $800,000 for $635,000. Now, I'm not disparaging the investor, because I'm going to say right now the investor has made plenty of money. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about how that works. Absolutely. So we don't need greedy people. We want common sense people. We want people that want to help people, and everybody wins along the way. And that's why when we started this, I want to say this is why I'm doing it. It is a complete win-win for everybody involved.
Yes. And thank you, Mark. And that's why we at Your Gray Matters Pod wanted to put you on and talk about rent to own, because this is a solution. It's an all-around winner for, as you put it, both parties. But just to clarify one last thing, if you're the tenant buyer, you bought your home, your paperwork says this amount, that's what you're paying for it. By the time you actually finish that contract, your house can be worth this.
Correct.
So you are doing amazing things by going through the maturity process or maturing process of learning how to do this with the guidance of you, Mark. So it's a terrific program. I want to thank you so much for coming out. As I said at Your Gray Matters podcast, we find miracles, we find solutions. We want people to understand that, and I say this respectfully, when the bank says no, there are places to go. It's Absolutely. Not the end of the line. And so, Mark, I thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want more information, simply email me at gray is with the letter E, yourgraymatterspod@gmail.com. In the subject line, please just put rent to own, and we will connect you with Mark. So,
Thanks
ladies
so
and
much for having me,
gentlemen,
Neil.
hey, this has been a great, great honor for me to have you on, Mark. Bless your heart for what you've been doing. And we will be back to you with the second part of this pod soon. Thank you. Views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of the Your Gray Matters podcast. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. The Your Gray Matters podcast name and all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owner, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service.